Erev Tov, guys. Not used to standing at this part of the room. It's a little bit strange, a new perspective. And haven't spoken to you all as a group, I guess, not since Simchas Torah. So every year I get 1 to 2 opportunities to give the Sikha. And I look forward to it because a lot of things I want to tell you. A lot of ideas that run through my head. And the challenge is always to find the right idea. The right idea for each year, for each class at this point of the year. And what I'm going to try to tell you today, I'm going to apologize up front. I'm speaking as much, and it's going to sound cliche, but I really mean it today. I'm speaking as much to you, or I should say as much to myself, as I am to you. And you'll hear it as I'm talking. This is not someone more senior telling you, hey, these were my mistakes, don't make them, although I will tell you that. But it's someone more senior saying, hey, I'm in the same boat as you on many of these issues. And I'd like us to try to work through them together. To the Shana Bet guys and anybody out in the audience who has heard me in the past, there will be some themes which repeat. There always are. I think they're important. I wouldn't say it again if I didn't think it was crucial and worthwhile to listen to. So what I'd like to do today, in the time we have together, is to share a crucial piece of advice. One crucial piece of advice I received from my Rav, from Rav Katzev, when I was in Shalavim, the last day of Shir, last minute of the last year of the year. It's with this that he excused us and sent us off into the world. At the time, I'll admit, I didn't appreciate it. I understood it, but I didn't appreciate it. And now it seems like words for life. So I'm going to share them with you. But first, a question to those of you sitting here. This is both for Shana Aleph and for Shana Bet. How many of you, just a show of hands, have already chosen a major for college? Let me rephrase that. Torah will be your major. How many of you have chosen a minor? How many of you have chosen a profession for afterwards, a direction? And the number is reduced. Yeah. I'll be honest, I spent 12 years in school, 4 years in yeshiva, and 4 years in college, and 3 years in graduate school, and worked for 7 years before I had any idea what I wanted to be when I grew up. And 3 years ago, I finally figured that out, in addition to teaching in the yeshiva. So you're not in a rush to make these decisions, and it's an advantage you have living in America. It's one of the few advantages you really have in living in America over living in Eretz Yisrael, because in America you have time. While here, students have to decide already in high school what they want to be when they grow up. Right in high school, they have to choose what's called migamot. These are electives, which more or less shape what you're going to do later on in life. So you have this advantage, but with it comes a major disadvantage. Because what it means for each of you is that you only start thinking about yourself, about what's important to you, what your goals are, what your aspirations, what matters most to you. You only start thinking about that much later in life. And that is unfortunate. In fact, I would say that's tragic, because determining not what you want to be when you grow up, but who you want to be when you grow up is something you need to do right now. Something you need to do right away, something you should have done already. That's what I want to talk about tonight. But we'll start with a story. A few stories tonight. This one's a little older. This one comes from Tanakh. In the time of Elisha Hanavi in Lachim Bet, Elisha was traveling. And among his travels, he used to stop in a certain town, the town of Shunem. And in this town, there was a woman at whose house he would often stay. Each year he would come. When he would visit this town, she would invite him into her home. And one day she told her husband, "Na'asena aliyat kir ktana, v'nasim lo sham mita v'shulchan v'kisei u'menorah. V'yabu v'oy leinu yasur shama." Let's build for this prophet who's constantly visiting us. Let's do something nice for him. He's in the guest room. Down here it's a little crowded. Let's build an attic. We'll add a floor, small little room. We'll put there a bed, a table, a light, so he can be comfortable when he comes and stays with us. And sure enough, the next time Elisha came, That's where he stayed. And he turned to his Nar Gehazi, his assistant, and he asked him, this Isha Shunamit, this important woman in town, by whom we always say, is so nice to us. What can we do for her? What is she missing? So we asked, Vayomer lo Amorna Elah Hinech Haradnu Elaynu Ad Kol Harada Azot. Ma la'asot lach. We're trying to figure out what can we do for you? What can we do to assist you? Hayesh ledaber lach el hamelach. I have connections with the king. Would you like me to speak with the king? Al sar tzava, to a general. And she answered, B'toch ami anochi yoshavim. I'm a simple person. I sit among my people. I don't need anything. Vayomer, so Elisha turned to Gehazi and asked, Ma la'asot lach, what should we do for her? She's not missing anything. She doesn't want anything. Vayomer Gehazi, aval bein enla, isha zaken. She has no children. She's barren. She's an akara, and her husband's old. She can't conceive with him anymore. So Elisha calls the woman back, and he says words which, of course, echo the words by Sarah Imenu, Vayomer lamoed hazeh ka'ed chaya, and rather ulasara ben, it says, at choveket ben, you will be holding a child. And so it was. Oh, and she says, please don't disappoint me. But sure enough, a year later, she has a child. The pasuk tells us, "Vayidal hayel," the child grew up. He went out to work in the fields, and he started complaining. His head hurt him, and his mother brought him home, and he died. Just like that. And the rest of the story is how Elisha eventually brings this child back to life. And the story is puzzling on many accounts. It would take us many classes to actually understand it. But I want to focus on the one crucial question. She didn't want this child. She never asked for this child, as she later yells at Elisha. So why is this child taken away from her? Why give this woman a child who didn't have one just so the child will die? It seems incredibly unfair. And Rav Elchanan Samet, in his Sefer on Pirkei Elisha, on the stories of Elisha, offers an explanation. I don't know if it's 100% correct, but it's an important lesson which relates to us. When you compare this woman to the other Akarot, the other similar women in Tanakh who lacked children, something very different about them. Did anybody notice that we had no idea that she was an Akara? Not until Gehazi told Elisha did we have any idea that she had no children. And that's a crucial difference between her and every other woman in Tanakh who's described in Akara. One of the first descriptions we have of them is Achana Akara. She has no children. Pina has children. Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, each of them, one of the first things we learn about them in their married lives is that they can't have children. And yet this woman has no children. We know nothing about it. And it's only, even when she's asked, what do you want? She says, I'm not missing anything. Nothing is lacking. So Samet suggests that the problem with this woman is that she never thought about having a child. She never prepared herself for having a child. And as a result, she was unable to hold on to that child. When you're not mentally prepared, when you haven't focused on this beforehand, when the child came, she didn't know what to do with it. Notice there's no discussion of her raising this child, as there is by all the other Akarot. It's simply the child is born, and when he was old enough, he went into the fields. Where's that mother-child connection? It doesn't exist in the story. You need to be thinking about what you want. You need to be planning. Had this woman, Isha Shunamit, viewed herself as a potential mother, perhaps she would have given that child more love. Perhaps she would have been more deserving. HaKadosh Baruch Hu took away the child, says Rav Samet, because she never appreciated it. And the gift which you don't appreciate, you lose. It's only then that she starts to appreciate it, she comes begging, and she eventually gets that child back. But it's an important message to each of us, which is you have to think about what you want to be and who you are. She never viewed herself as a mother in waiting, as this potential mother, and as a result, she was never successful in it. And that's why right now, starting today, I think each of us have to start asking ourselves some very difficult questions. Questions like, who are you? It sounds strange, but it's a crucial question to ask. Who am I? What's important to me? What do I value? How do I want other people to view me? What do I want them to think about me? How do other people view me now based on how I'm acting? And what can I do to match the person that I want to be, or to connect the person that I am with the person that I want to be? These are not very comfortable questions. They're a little, I'll use the word, they're a little flaky. But they're crucial questions if you really want to grow. And they're crucial questions to start asking, not next week, not next year, but tonight, tomorrow, over Shabbos. The year is so short. Before you know it, it's going to be over. And you have this opportunity here that is very, very unique. And don't blow it by not asking these questions. You don't want to do what the Isha Shuna Mitzvah did, which is not to prepare and potentially lose something which you value. Let me put it differently. When I was in yeshiva, we would categorize students, not orally, but everybody knew. You could identify someone. You probably say the word and everyone knew who you're talking about. Amongst the guys in our yeshiva, there was the masmid, there was the tzaddik, there was the ish ruach, right? The one who was very lively. There was the clown. There was the jerk. There was the one who was too smooth for himself. There was the ish chesed. There were people who could be defined by their actions. And you have to ask yourself, which of them are you? And which of them do you want to be? Are you that learning machine? Are you the guy who sits down and just doesn't get up until he's finished learning, from morning until the end of the Seder, he doesn't waste a minute? Because they have one in every yeshiva. Is that you? Are you the guy who never speaks not nicely about somebody else? Are you the person who's always running over to the other guy when he's not in a good mood, trying to cheer people up? Are you the optimist? Are you the pessimist in the room? Are you the guy who's serving as a role model towards everybody else in davening, for chesed, for being a mensch? We all can't be the best in everything, but you better try. Figure out who you want to be, and let's figure out how to get there. When you get older, and the reason I'm telling you it's so important to do this now, as you get older, change becomes more and more difficult. And it's not just because you get used to being a certain way. That's a big part of it. It's also socially difficult. The environments in which you're in are not conducive to change. You get pegged as a certain type of person, and it's not just are you a tzaddik or a rasha. Are you a good worker or a bad worker in your office? Are you too social or are you too quiet? Any personality trait, you get pegged that way, and it's very hard, very uncomfortable to try to suddenly act like somebody else. Everybody knows you as a certain type. To act differently becomes difficult, unless you're in one of these unique windows of opportunity. Like when you move from one community to another, one job to another, one school to another, then the slate is clean, and you can try to be somebody else. You can experiment and see if it works. But right now, one of the advantages of being in a yeshiva, and the environment of a yeshiva, is that you have that opportunity to experiment, to try to be the person you want to be each and every day with no repercussions. You're in a place, yeshiva by definition is a place where everybody's thinking. Everybody's growing. Everybody's trying to change and improve. So if you experiment and try to become a better person, no one will look at you funny, because everybody's going through that same process. If you want to be that quiet tzaddik, you can. Just start acting like him. I'll tell you a true story about the bencher boy. When I was in yeshiva, there was a guy, I would classify him perhaps as the cool guy. You know who he was. Probably somewhere in the yeshiva. We had him in high school. One day at lunch, someone at the table said, I want a bench. Still not that deep into the year. Okay, well, bench. They said, let's make a mezuzah. It's one of the firmer ones. We wanted a bench and have a mezuzah. And other guys would have been happy to just get up and leave, either without benching, certainly without a mezuzah. And this cool guy, well, that's the way I'm referring to him, said, wait, I want to get a bencher. Oh, come on, you only have an hour and a half break. This is the end of the day, including lunch. I want to get off and either play ball or go to sleep. I've got to go get a bencher. It's the other side of the room. He says, I took it upon myself not to bench without a bencher. And that's what he did. He went, he got a bencher, and he benched. And he did this each and every day, each and every meal. And it's an amazing thing that what happens when you take on a little change like that. All right, everyone was doing crazy things. This one suddenly's got a 10-minute Shema and a 20-minute Shemona Esrei. So this guy benches with a bencher. But when you have to get up and you actually go get a bencher, before you start benching, it changes the way you bench. Because you think about it for a moment. It only takes 30 seconds, but you realize you're about to go ahead and make a bracha. You're actually doing something important. You think about it before you do it. And then when you're actually saying the benching, and you're reading it, it's amazing how much slower you are. It's amazing how much more kavanah you have. And then when you're finished, you didn't just run out of a meal. You took your bencher and you put it back in a place. You ended your meal with a little more kavod. And it began with that. And once you became sort of the star bencher, you said, okay, I'm going to start working on davening. You became the role model of davening. You said, maybe I should have some content. Start learning. Start coming to Seder on time. And slowly but surely he developed into what we can only refer to as an all-star. And this brings me back to that piece of advice I wanted to share with you from my Rav, which I thought was so cliche at the time, but now I realize it was just how important it was. He told us, don't be a college student who learns Torah. Be a Ben Torah who happens to be in college. I'll repeat it. Don't be a college student who learns Torah. Be a Ben Torah who happens to be in college. And at the time, as cute and cliche as it sounded, I think I missed just how crucial a distinction that really is. Because in essence, what Rav Katzer was telling me was you need to determine who you want to be. What is your focal point before you move on? What is the core around everything else which you do is going to circulate and revolve? Are you a student first who's trying to fit halakha and learning and being a mensch in life into student? Or is your focus on being a Ben Torah? And school is just a means to an end. A means towards knowledge, a means towards a job, a means towards a better appreciation of Hashem, but ultimately it's a means to an end. The end itself is being a Ben Torah. It's that question the Isha Shunamit never asked herself. Am I a mother-in-waiting who runs a business? Or am I a mother who runs a woman who runs a business who happens to not have a child? And it's a question I want you to start asking yourselves right now. Are you an 18 or 19-year-old student who happens to be in yeshiva? Or are you a Ben Torah who just happens to be 19? And I cannot believe, cannot accept, that deep down inside, each of us doesn't know the answer to that question. That deep down inside, each of us doesn't know and doesn't realize that, well, we need to be more than we are today. Each of us deep down inside knows that we need to improve in certain areas, whether that's being a better mensch or better learner. We're not where we want to be. We're not where we need to be. And the problem is, the reason deep down inside we know this, but we don't act on it, is because we don't look deep down inside. We never think about who we're doing and what we are and where we're going. We never ask, if I want to be this person, I want to be that Ben Torah who just happens to be only 19. What does that mean? What are the implications of being that Torah? I can't believe that deep down inside, each of you don't know that the cool guy who shows up late to Minyan is not what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants you to be. And therefore, it's not who you want to be. But you know that. You feel it deep down inside. You just don't act on it on a day-to-day basis because you're not thinking about it. And at this point, I want to make this a little more practical. Normally, right now, what I should do is explain to you, so what does it mean to be a Ben Torah? And how do you become that? But I want to take it from the opposite side. I want to bring it from a different direction. And I'll give you an example from when I was in law school. I attended law school in Harvard. And the last day of school, we had a discussion where people were describing how did law school go for them? Did they enjoy it or not? And the response was, it was shocking to see. There was a bunch of us frum guys were sitting together, and we didn't talk. But we all had similar experiences. And everybody else, the non-frum Jews, but mainly the Goyim in the class, had been overwhelmed by school. It was all encompassing, overwhelming. And we had a very, very different experience. And my non-Jewish friends at the time couldn't understand how it was that I was having children and going to Minyan 3 times a day, taking off for the Chagim. Little did they know we were also learning and doing all these other things and maintaining ourselves in school. And the answer is very simple. We had totally different approaches to what this school was all about. There was a student in our class who was our first year, They wanted these 60, 70-page reading assignments. I didn't do it. I rarely did those. Didn't have time. Skipped it. During the discussion, he raised his hand and mentioned something, and the professor was impressed and started asking where this was from. And it turned out that in that 60 to 70 pages of reading, there were footnotes. And he had read the footnotes. I didn't read the reading, he read the footnotes. And he was so interested by something the footnote said that he went to the library and took out the article quoted in the footnote, and that's what he was quoting in class. Okay, we had 60, 70 pages and multiple courses to do each time. This is what he had done. I was blown away at the time, and it was also said, there's not a chance in the world that I've even tried to do something like that. Because my attitude towards school and his were diametrically opposed to one another. And there's nothing wrong with that. We simply had different goals and values. I would have been just as happy getting my diploma and never ever showing up to class. I wasn't there to broaden my knowledge of law. I wasn't there to learn in depth that which we were discussing. To understand law, you're learning tomorrow. You know, I discussed half these issues already. I didn't care that much about American law. To me, it was a means to an end. I wanted the paper. I wanted the diploma because a law degree was a means to an end for me. And for these people, it was a way of life. They really cared. They were really committed. When a professor didn't show up to class, they sat around and discussed the material without him. I went home. They sat around and discussed without him. They wanted to be Supreme Court justices. And the only way to do that is to learn Lishma and learn everything you could and just bring it all in and absorb it all. I didn't want to be a Supreme Court justice. I didn't want to be a lawyer. I just wanted the piece of paper because it would help me later in life. Now, that doesn't mean they all were Supreme Court justices. I assume some of them will be one day. But they all tried to be. And that's what it means to be a Ben Torah. Sounds strange. But that attitude that they had, the approach which they took to their goals, is the approach we need to be taking towards our goals. Are we here in yeshiva just to get a piece of paper? That's what I wanted, but that was me. That's what I needed. But is that why we come to yeshiva? So you can say, I went to yeshiva for a year. I went Shana Bet, just so you can hang that on your wall. Say, years later when you try to get a shidduch, yeah, I went Shana Bet. I'm a good guy. Is that what this is really all about? In law school, there were very few people, besides the frum guys who were there for law degrees, and nothing more, who ever skipped class. It just wasn't done. Nobody interrupted their professors when they were teaching. The libraries were packed yomam v'layla with people studying. Nobody schmoozed in the middle of class. Nobody interrupted when someone was talking. No one went out to grab a bite and come back in. There's no shuffling during sessions. It just didn't exist in a law school. Why should yeshiva be any different? Is our goals here any less important than these students in law school, or med school, or in any graduate school, or in any college? It doesn't exist. It only happens in yeshivas. I don't know why, but why should it be any different? These people had a goal. They knew who they wanted to be, and they were driven towards becoming that person. You should also have a goal and be driven towards that. Again, as I mentioned, I often skipped assignments or skipped out on school. But that's because I thought there were things at that point in my life that were more important. Family, religious obligations, etc. But those were not easy decisions. They came at a cost. There was always a risk, a poor grade. In yeshiva, you don't have those repercussions. You don't show up, you don't do something, it's all on you. So you need to take responsibility for that, and you need to be honest about your decision making. So if you don't show up to shir one day, or if you show up and you interrupt, or if you show up and then you go to take a drink and you don't come back, or if you're rude to somebody, inside or outside shir, do you have the justification? It's because you're doing something more important. I skipped class in law school. You know why? I wanted to go to Minyan. Because I wanted to go home to my family. Because there were things, because I didn't think this law school class was that important. I didn't need it to get my degree. I just need to write a paper. If I wanted to do more in law, then I should have stayed. As many people, including from people, do, because it was important to them. But that wasn't my goal. But here in yeshiva, I'm not sure what the other goals are. If you're not here to learn and to grow, why are you here? And if that's the type of person you want to become, so why would you be doing these things that nobody anywhere else in the world does? And for those of you who say, no, I want to leave, I can't do it because it's too hard. Remember, growth takes time. We'll come back to that in just a few minutes. Because it's important you realize this is not just about how hard or how much you learn. This is about who you want to be and how you want people to view you as a human being, as a person, as a mensch, as a Ben Torah. How do you treat others? How do you talk to them? What language do you use in your everyday conversations that reflects on who you are? How do you act when you're standing on a bus, on a bus stop, or on a street corner? When you enter a restaurant with some friends, how do you behave? Because other people are watching you, and that has an effect on others and on yourselves. When you want to give your classmate, your roommate, your shir mate, Musar, and that's okay. How do you do it? What type of person you are will determine the answer to that question. Several years ago, I was in a meeting with the CEO of one of the most successful venture capital groups in Israel. And they were in the middle of a rebranding process. They had brought in the people from marketers to give presentations so they can choose who would be next. And I was blown away what happened in one of these meetings. The graphic artist presented the presentation on the board for the PowerPoint, and they had handed the two owners of this company had handed their business cards to the CEO. Sitting in the room. They walked out, and before, usually at that point, we would go around and give our opinions as to what had just occurred. He says, nope, they're out. I said, why not? Well, what are they out? What did they do wrong? He showed their business cards. He said, look, here it says, I don't remember which street it was, Jaffa Street. And here it says Jaffa Road. The presentation was beautiful. They did a great job. They were very creative. But on their business cards, they hadn't been careful enough to make sure the same address for the two people. Same street, but they called once a street and once a road because they translated from Hebrew differently. And no one ever spent the time comparing the two in the English translation. And for that, he said they're out. These people lost hundreds of thousands of dollars in potential business. That small little error. Why was it so important to him? Because you're my graphic artist and you're about my brand and you're going to determine how to market me, then every little detail matters. And if you can't even get your own business cards aligned, well, how are you going to take my whole company and make sure everything is done the way it needs to be done? And it's the same thing with all your actions in your life. How you talk to someone, how you treat the other people, how you eat your sandwich, whether or not you tuck yourself in when you walk down the street, when you're wearing clean clothing or dirty clothing, all these aspects reflect on who you are, how people perceive you, and ultimately how you're going to perceive yourself. So let me ask you all a very hard question, a difficult question. When was the last time that you honestly looked at yourself in the mirror and said, am I living up to my potential? Am I being all that I can be? Am I trying as hard as I need to try to be the person I want to be? When was the last time you took a look at your davening and said, you know what, I can do a little better there? You're benching. Perhaps you're learning. For most of us, that would be Yom Kippur. It's the only time of the year most of us ever introspect and think, who am I and what do I want to be? And even then, it's on such a general level. You know, aviti, chatati, parashati. We don't pay attention to the words. We have so much to say in so little time. It's hard to think. I'm a bad person. I want to be better. It's about the level most of us get to. But on a daily basis, you should be doing that and going much deeper. Asking yourself, really, who do I want to be and how do I get there? Doesn't matter if it's a question of simply go through your day. At the end of the day, sit through your morning. How did I wake up? Did I make it to minyan on time? How did I daven? Afterwards, was I kind and polite and courteous to other people? Or was I rude? About eating. How did I bench? Did I make it to Seder on time? Did I put my hand on someone's shoulder to help them out? Did I pick up a piece of paper that was lying on the floor? Did I throw my plate out at the end of lunch? All these little questions. Just ask yourself, not every day. Once in a while, ask. So explore what you're up to. Let me put it differently. Are you really living to your potential? Are you pushing yourself as hard as you can? Are you maximizing the potential, the person that you can be? You may be doing what you think you can do. But that's not what I'm asking you. I'm not asking you, do you look like you're doing as much as you can? I'm asking you, are you really doing as much as you can? Because that is something you need to think about. That's where most of us fail. Most of us don't realize how incredible our potential is. And when I was in yeshiva every year, Rosh Yeshiva would quote this Sichot Musar of Rav Chaim Shmulevitz, and I've tried to quote it to at least one person a year. Chaim Shmulevitz in last week's parasha, in the pasuk Vayigal et ha'even me'al pia be'er. When Yaakov arrives at this well, and there's a rock on top of the well, he removes it. And Rashi says, Kimi shemavir tepakak me'al hatzluchit. He was able to take off his huge rock that normally took 3 people to lift by himself by taking a bottle cap off a bottle. Rashi says, teaches you his strength was great. Explains Rav Chaim Shmulevitz, what do you mean his strength was great? He was Hercules. He was Shimshon HaGibor. It's obviously not what it is. He quotes the piyut that we say in Tfilat Geshem, Yichad le'ev v'gal even mipi be'er mayim, v'avuro al timna mayim. It's not his physical strength, but his inner strength. There was some sort of adrenaline that came out. It was a potential he always had, but came out at that exact moment. We all have that potential within us. We can do far more than we give ourselves credit for if we only try. So I'll give you 2 examples from my own personal life. 2 life-changing moments. I might have quoted them last year, but it's worth repeating. They're simple stories. They've stayed with me ever since and really guide me. One was Shana Aleph. Night Seder used to end at 10:30 at night, and then we'd go back to the dorm, most of us. Those of us who stayed till the end of Night Seder at 10:30. We'd go back to the dorm, we'd play games. Board games, we'd hang out, we'd fool around. I ended up going to bed around 1:30, with the argument always being, after a full, intense day of learning, I need to unwind. I need to ease my mind. It's been going crazy all day with all this Gemara, and all this Halacha, and Tanakh, and philosophy, and everything else we're learning. My head's going to explode. I want to go to sleep. I need to calm my mind, do something lightweight. And we would do that for 2-3 hours. So until one of my chavrusa's roommates was an Israeli, an older Israeli. I think he was 60 years at that time. Huge lamda, huge Talmud Chacham, learning all the time. He was looking for a chavrusa. He had a friend who had a chavrusa with him during the break. He was looking for a chavrusa between 12 a.m. and 1 a.m. He asked me, do I know anybody? And I said, and I still remember the feeling. I'm telling the story, and I'm getting those same butterflies in my stomach and in my chest that I had at that moment when I heard the question. So I started thinking, this is an opportunity. This guy is incredible. He knows everything. He's looking to learn with somebody for an hour. It's 12 to 1. I'm up then anyway. I haven't gone to bed before 1 in months. And I said yes. And I'm still gulping as I say it, as I said it then. Yes, I'll do it. Me. So from 12 to 1 for the rest of the year, I learned with this guy. And what it did, beyond whatever I learned between 12 and 1, which I don't know, I was probably exhausted. I don't know how much, I really don't know how worthwhile that 12 to 1 slot was in its own right. We covered a lot of material, and I can't quote any of it. I've never given a shiur on a single thing I learned with him. I probably don't even remember half the books we learned together. I remember the others were pulling all this stuff out. But what happened was, once I was learning from 12 to 1, what? I'm going to leave the base medrash at 10:30 at night, go back to my dorm to unwind for an hour and a half, and then come back? No. So I had a chavrusa from 10:30 to 11, and another chavrusa from 11 to 12. When I came back at 1, around 10, I got into my room. I was so exhausted, I shut my eyes, and I went to sleep. Probably sleeping before I shut my eyes, before I hit the pillow. So exhausted. And you know what? I was fine the next day. Might have been tired, but my mind didn't explode. My brain didn't blow up. I didn't need to unwind, I suddenly realized. That was just something that my brain kept telling me I needed to do, but it wasn't true. Sometimes it is true. I'm saying that to me, at that year, it was unnecessary. It was this falsehood I'd adopted to continue acting the way I'd always been acting and not change, not grow as an individual. And I think in life, this has taught me, there's nothing wrong with relaxing as long as you actually need to relax. Sometimes you need to re-energize yourself and push yourself so that you can have better learning, better chesed, be a better person the next day. But always, every day, is it true? Maybe it is. I don't know. No one can answer that question except for each of you. But I would bet, and I'd bet a lot of money, that for most of you, The amount of time you think you need to unwind on a daily basis, it's not so much. You have far more potential than you give yourself credit for. When I was in college, people would ask me, can we go out next week? We were friends I hadn't seen in a long time. I said, go more. We're anxious to see you next Tuesday night. You're coming into town. There was a guy you see every day. He says, let's have fun next Tuesday night. Why you ask me on Tuesday? If on Tuesday I feel stressed out between work and learning and this and that, and I need to release, so we'll go do something. We'll go grab a bite to eat. But you're asking me now to plan entertainment value next Tuesday? I don't know if I need it. Again, you tell me we're going to go to a play in which I'm going to learn something, it's one thing. Tell me there's value. But you're telling me just to unwind. I can't tell you, I can't plan to unwind next week. Something you need to judge yourself on a daily basis. And I see it, it's not just, I used to think this was just when I was 18 and 19 and 20 until I graduated college. And now that I'm an adult, this doesn't happen anymore. But the world changes so fast, just as you get used to this. And you had this life-altering moment, new technologies come in and changes everything. In our house for a while, we had these laptops and computers and internet. And you check the nights. You finish everything. You finish learning. You're out to go to sleep. Let me just check the news. No television. Just check it online. With a filter and everything. Before you know it, I'll unwind for 5 minutes reading the news. And 5 minutes turns into 25 and 55 and an hour and 5. And you just waste hours. Let me check my email. Let me see if anyone wrote me on this and on that. And it's ridiculous. Not that long ago, 10, 15 years ago, before I met Eliad, 10 years ago, we had a computer at home. Of course, we didn't have email. I guess we had email 10 years ago, but we really didn't use it much. And we didn't use the internet at home because we had a modem dial-up. It was so slow, it just wasn't worth it. So at night, what would you do when you were tired and you'd finished? You'd either learn more, you'd talk, or you'd go to sleep. I didn't need to do this. Suddenly I realize now in my life, my wife and I talked about this recently, what are we doing with that little slot of time when we're looking at the computer? Who needs the computer a half hour before you go to sleep? What's so important? With these smartphones, you have access to it all the time. You have to check. So we sat down. We don't need it anymore. Read a book. Learn. Go to sleep early and have more energy for the next day. And the same is true in every aspect of your life. Check what you really need. Check if what you're doing is what you really do. Remember who you want to be. Does this help? Is these actions helping you or hurting you? You may be having an argument with somebody. Do you really need to curse to make your point? Is that really necessary? To show who you are? To be cool? Is that the way you need to talk? I would argue, probably not, right? Is that the type of person you want to be? A person with a foul mouth but big Talmud Chacham? Is that really what anybody here wants to be? Is it really impossible to bench slowly? Do we all need to rush through our benching? Or our davening? Do we all want to be that big masmid who finishes his Shemona Esrei in 30 seconds? Is that anybody's goal? Is waking up in the morning so hard? Is it really so hard to make it to Minyan on time? I'll take you back to law school or to college. You have early morning classes. People are there on time. They show up. And they might schedule later classes, some of them, but 8 o'clock through 9 o'clock classes, people come. And this is after having already gone running and doing a million other things. I took an art and humanities class, I remember, a weightlifting class with the football team. Because it was a non-contact sport, weightlifting, so and it was all men. So it was going to co-ed college. That was very important for your phys ed course. Unfortunately, I was this little, they used to use me as the bar to lift up and down. But these guys would show up. This was an early morning class. I would show up after Minyan, and these guys were there. Some of us were rolling into Minyan a little late. These guys had already, had practice in the morning. God knows how many laps they'd already run. They'd done a million things. Now they're going to work out again. If they can make it on time, why can't we make it on time to Minyan? This is really a mental challenge, not a physical. That's one life message. Altering moment. It's a little altering moment that really ask yourself, who are you, what do you want to be, and how do you get there? I'll give you another one. For those of you who think, I know what I want to be, but some of these things just aren't working for me. I'm going to slink out of class because I just don't like it. I'm just not getting anything out of it at this point. I'm going to act this way because I'm trying to change, and it's just not working. I have I'll say a one-word answer for you. Time. It's all a question of time. You can't become the person you want to become overnight. It can't happen instantly. Everything is about a process. Everything takes time. One more college story. I've told this one in the yeshiva before. I don't remember how many years ago. It was last year. Maybe it was this year. We had a requirement when I was in college called Music Humanities. We had to learn classical music, to understand music and how it worked. We had to write a paper in which we analyzed a classical piece of music. And part of that requirement was going to an actual concert. You have to go to the concert, listen to the piece, attach your ticket to your paper, and then describe the piece of music on the paper. I was lucky. I've been pushing this off. I was terrified of this. I had no interest in doing it. But my friends, who were a little more preppy than I, wanted to culturize me. They surprised me one day. They said, "Arlie, we're going out tomorrow night." And I said, "Really? We've had this discussion. I don't plan going out in advance." They said, "Don't worry. You're going to learn something from this. I'm taking you to a concert." "Oh, I got to do that for school anyway. Perfect. Tomorrow night works." We got all dressed up in our jackets and our penny loafers, and we went out to dinner. Friendship dinner. Good dinner. And from there, they brought two furs, very good seats, orchestra seats. We come into the concert, having just eaten a big meat meal, and sitting in this comfortable chair, and the lights go out, and soft music comes on, and I'm fast asleep. I'm out cold within about 30 seconds. Intermission comes, and they start hitting their rhythm. They never took me out again, let's put it that way. But afterwards, something happened. This is the point of the story. Afterwards, I had to write this paper. And I had nothing to write since I didn't hear I didn't hear a note of the concert. So I borrowed a CD. And I had to describe, it's a very hard assignment, to describe in words what happens in this concert. How the string instruments are competing with their percussions, and their notes are ascending, and trying to describe the music. So I listened to the first 3 seconds of the music and tried to describe it in words. And then I listened to the next 3 seconds, and the next 3 seconds, and rewound it to see if what I was saying still made sense. I must have listened to that piece of music 500 times. And by the time I finished and wrote this paper, an amazing thing happened. I understood it. I saw the beauty in it. This wasn't just some background music to Woody Woodpecker. This was actually a masterful piece of music with themes and variations, and I finally understood it. And at that point, you know what I wanted more than anything in the world? I wanted to go to a concert. I wanted to hear how an orchestra would perform this, to see how would their take on it be, how would they interpret this. Of course, I blew that opportunity. That wasn't going to happen. But it's an important message for life. You can only appreciate certain things if you put in the effort beforehand. The more you put in, the more you get out. It's the same thing with sports or anything in life. Right? If you want to understand the NFL, you need to study it. If you don't know what's going on, it just looks like a bunch of guys hitting each other. But if you have a deep understanding of the game, then even a seemingly unimpressive play can be impressive. It's the same thing about piano. If I sit down at a piano, I feel trapped. I like music, certain types of music, but a piano, I don't know what to do. But if you've sat there for years and studied and know which notes go well with which and how you play the piano, then you can set yourself free and make beautiful music. It's all a question of what you put in. It's the same thing with your learning. It's the same thing with your growth. You want to be the guy who's serious about his learning. You can't say, it's not working for me. At least not in Kislev. It's been 2 months since this month started. You need to be going and plugging and trying, and eventually things start to click. And eventually you hear that piece of music and you're like, wow. It happens with Gemara. At this point, it may not be working for you. But you put in enough effort, at some point in time, I don't know if it's a year, 2 years, 6 months, 3 months, at some point in time, it'll start to click. And then you hear that Gemara and you're like, wow, that is amazing. And I've told guys, when you start giving shiurim at Divrei Torah, you see this so beautifully. You prepare a shiur on a sugya, on a part of the Parshat Shavua. And you study everything there is to study about that Parshat Shavua. And then you give the shiur. Right? And the next week you hear the Shabbos comes and you hear the parsha. And as they're laying in, you're listening and you're thinking, But when they read those 10 psukim that you just gave a shir or the Torah about, it's a totally different experience. Do you know why? Because as they read that pasuk, you're hearing in your mind Rashi's argument, and Rashbam's argument, and Ibn Ezra, and the Radak. And you're seeing things that other people reading probably aren't paying attention to. Now think about the Gedolim. Think about those on the next level. Every time they hear Parsha, that's what they're hearing. The people who really know Tanakh, or really know Chumash, really know Gemara, every time they read a little thing, they're hearing a symphony. Because they're not just reading the Gemara, they're hearing the Rishonim argue over those lines as they read the words. You can reach that level quite easily. Not on an entire Gemara, but on a line here or there, or on a pasuk in Chumash, or a few psukim. But it takes time. And the more you put in beforehand, the more you'll get out afterwards. And it's hard. There was a magazine a number of years ago who had a page. The title of the page was Boring But Important. All the news on this page is boring. You need to read it anyway because it's important. So we put it all on one page for you. All the really important things you need to know, but they called it boring but important. It was brilliant. This is stuff that I'm not going to actually enjoy at this point in time, but I need to know. And sometimes it's hard. The beginnings are difficult. But if you want to be that guy, if you want to be the person who's truly a Ben Torah, if that's the goals you set for yourself, you need to try that. So how do you do this? How do you do it? I can't really tell you, because the answer is up to each of you. But the first step is to recognize your situation. Recognize your potential. Recognize how much you can accomplish, either in learning or menschlichkeit, how you behave towards others, how you act, how you daven in your relationship with Hashem. Realize what your potential is. It's far more than you can imagine. And then ask yourself, am I truly pushing myself? Perhaps you are. Perhaps you need a break. Perhaps you've been pushing yourself too much the last week. I don't know. It's a question that's going to change each and every day when you ask it. But you have to ask it. Be careful. It's so easy to rationalize and change your direction. And the next step is to act. Small steps. Slowly build yourself a program to become the person you want to be. Most of all, be honest about it. Really, really honest. And I know that's hard, but you need to try. And with this, I want to return towards our opening thesis. It's still early in the Zman, a long Zman, especially this year. And it's just the beginning. You have plenty of time to figure out who you want to be and to build yourself into that person. Visualize it right now. Spend a second. Just imagine. Who is it the guy that you want to be? You want to be known as the masmid? You want to be known as the nice guy? You want to be known the person who's always, he's not being so good. His bench is so good. He's always so caring for others. You got to be one of those people. You got to be part of one of those people. Visualize it so that it can happen. The Gemara in Yoma, it's Daf Yomi this past week, for those learning Daf Yomi, quotes a pasuk in Sefer Shemot about Kabbalat HaTorah. Vayishkon kvod Hashem al Har Sinai, v'yichaseu ha'anan. Moshe's up on Har Sinai. Ignore the question of the Gemara. Moshe's on Har Sinai. Kvod Hashem comes on Har Sinai. V'yichaseu ha'anan. And the Anan, this cloud, covers it. And the Tanaim here have an argument. It's an ambiguous pronoun for those of you in my shir. It's unclear. V'yichaseu. The cloud covered him. Who did the cloud cover? Most of us would read it. The cloud covered Har Sinai. Rabbi Yosef Louis says no. The cloud covered Moshe Rabbeinu. And they explain to threaten him. The Torah would be received with fear. Beretet ubizayah. Rashi explains. The Prishala Moshe lavdilo mibnei Adam. To separate Moshe from the people around him. So that he'll be fearful because he's alone, trapped in this cloud. And then it'll take a moment to realize that when he enters the Machaneh Shekhinah, it needs to be with fear. The cloud at Har Sinai didn't cover the mountain, it didn't only cover the mountain, it covered specifically Moshe Rabbeinu. Do you want to be enveloped by Torah? You want to be in this cloud of Torah by being a Ben Torah? Or do you want to watch that cloud from the side? You have that ability. Do what Moshe Rabbeinu was asked to do. To spend a moment before Kabbalat Torah, separate himself from everybody, be all alone in this cloud, and think for a moment what's about to happen. He was meant to be scared and recognize the importance of what he's about to undergo. You can do the same thing each and every day. Separate yourself for one moment. Ask, what is it that I'm about to do? What is it I want to be and become? And get in the right mental state. 3 steps. Step 1, visualize what you want to be. Not what, who you want to be. Second, choose 1 or 2 areas that are important. Small baby steps that you can take. It could be grabbing a bencher before you bench every day. It could be coming to minyan on time. Learning for an extra 5 minutes. Whatever it is, 1, 2 small things at a time. And then try to check yourself on a daily basis. Ask yourself, am I doing it? Not, am I living up to my full potential? Am I doing what I asked yesterday? Yesterday I decided I want to be the person who benches out of a bencher. Am I that person? Yesterday I decided I want to be the person who does A, B, or C. And try to figure it out. 1 step at a time. You have the potential. It's so hard. It's so hard, but you build habits. You build habits which will change and stay with you for life. The same way nobody in this room, whatever you would consider, I'm assuming, being Mechalel Shabbos. I say no one in my law school would ever consider just standing out and walking out of class in the middle of a law school class. It just wasn't done. Same way these things become norms. So too you can have a norm I would never consider. It can happen to you. Never consider not going to minyan one day. Davening b'yechidus. How many people I know who just years and years and years never davened mincha marav with a minyan. Then they started. Somebody died. They were not able to. They started to come. And now they're at the point they can't imagine what life was like when these did not go to minyan. Just a question of hergel, getting used to something. The time to act is today. Tonight. Right now. Who do you want to be? How do you become that person? Why can't Marv, which you're about to daven, the Marv we're about to daven right now, why can't that be the best Marv you've ever had this year? What's stopping you from right now focusing for 1 Marv and having it be your best Marv of the year? And if you're successful in that, well then maybe afterwards the Mishmar you have following up could be your best Mishmar of the year, which might lead to tomorrow's Shacharis being the best Shacharis of the year. Decide for yourself right now. Do you want to be a 19-year-old who happens to be in yeshiva? Or are you a yeshiva student who just happens to be only 19? And the person you decide to become now, you can live your whole life as that individual. Erev Tov, guys.